We're at 3 kilograms per day. It can be at a ton per month in early 2027. That's still not commercial. Ton per day is commercial. We have a spandex coming out that will be biodegradable. Not this year. Don't anybody call me yet.
Welcome to Polycast by UT, the podcast from Urethanes Technology International, where we talk markets, business, and big trends across the polyurethane industry. Joining us today is Dr. Stephen Mayfield, founder and CEO of Algenesis, the company behind Soleic, a plant-based polyurethane platform designed to biodegrade and help tackle persistent plastic pollution and microplastics. Stephen is a former distinguished professor of molecular biology at University of California, San Diego, where he spent 15 years. He holds degrees in biochemistry and plant biology and has also founded several algae and biotechnology companies, including Rincon Pharmaceutical, Sapphire Energy, Triton Health and Nutrition, and Algenesis, which he launched in 2016. So welcome to the podcast, Stephen.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Thank you. And I can't help but make reference straight away, Stephen, to your love of algae science. You founded several algae-related businesses over the years. I know it's your long-term target feedstock. So why algae?
Yeah, that's it's a complex relationship. But first principles, it's what all petroleum comes from. Petroleum is not melted dinosaurs. It's just ancient algae. They're the most efficient photosynthetic organisms on the planet. And so if you believe that climate change is real and we should at least be making an attempt to address it, it's just the obvious way to go. And then the fact that it's a single cell and you can engineer it is what really attracted me to it. I got a PhD in genetics from UC Berkeley years ago, working on corn, of all things. And then just decided, you know what, this is going to take me forever to learn how the genetics of this guy works. But I thought photosynthesis was totally cool. Taking sunlight and CO2 and turn it into products, I just thought was the future. Even 40 years ago, I thought that. And so just started down this path. And then over the years, just did all kinds of biotech things, made anti-cancer drugs, made biofuels, made polymers, made protein as food, made human nutraceuticals. It's still, I would say, a work in progress in that there are many algae companies out there, but none of them are huge, right? It hasn't taken off the way agriculture has, but I think it still has the potential to contribute, significantly to the sort of the future of the planet.
I was going to say, I mean, since I joined the magazine, I've had many conversations on this topic, not just with Algenesis. I interviewed Nick last year, and I've spoken to companies like Blueburn, Felix there, who's a very interesting individual. And what I've kind of gathered from those conversations really is that the supply chain for algae remains quite immature, maybe quite expensive. Would you say the main issue of algae at this moment in time is the lack of commodity supply, the different types of algae that exist and getting sort of consistency there, or the cost issues of drying it, for example?
Yeah, all of the above.
Yeah.
If you look at agriculture and how long it took us to get that to really go, I mean, wheat was grown 12,000 years ago, but it didn't really become commercial until 300 years ago, maybe. So, that's okay, 11,700 years to get that going. It just takes a while to get any new technology. I think the one that we can probably most relate to is the computer, right? All of us now take the iPhone and take AI and take all of this stuff for granted. But computers were invented, more than 100 years ago. The first ones, and certainly even the electronic versions of them, were out 80 years ago, 90 years ago. Same with photovoltaics, right? They've been around for 200 and something years, right? And really in their present form for the last 90 years, right? And yet still really only the last 20 years have photovoltaics really started to dominate in energy and become functional. So things take time to mature, partly because it's never a single innovation or single invention that pushes them over the top. It's never like, oh, algae was missing one thing and we fixed it. you need better growth conditions, you need better harvesting, you need crop protection, you need to learn how to
Mm,
commoditize, how to monetize every part of the food of the
yeah.
biomass, right? That's what they did in agriculture.
y-
People always say if pig farmers only sold ham and bacon, they'd be out of business pretty quick. They've learned to monetize every part of a pig.
mm,
And so we just need to learn those same things. So you need a lot of different people working on a lot of different aspects on it, unfortunately, for a lot of years. But when I look at some of the products that are out there, all virtually 100% of
mm.
omega-3s are now produced from algae. There's
Okay.
very little that actually comes from fish anymore.
Oh,
So
okay. I
that's
didn't know
just
that.
one
That's interesting.
example of where,
Yeah.
okay, now this has taken over and dominates the industry.
Mm,
I think the same is going to be true for single-celled protein pretty
right.
quick here in the next decade or so, because soybeans and other ways that we get it now are just too inefficient,
Mm.
right? And so I think these things are coming along, and I think that every in every day, in every way, we're getting a little better.
Is there a particular type of algae that is suitable for producing the lipids you need to convert into polyols?
Yeah, good. That's a good question there because people mix up a lot of different algae. In fact, there's two big classes. There are algae, which are eukaryotic cells, and there are cyanobacteria, which are prokaryotic cells. Completely different
Mm.
parts of the evolutionary chain, right? So cyanobacteria are you see these that's spirulina is the most common one. If you've been in a grocery
Yes.
store, you
Yeah.
will see spirulina. Spirulina grows really fast, really high protein content, really bad at accumulating lipids, right? So they tend to accumulate carbohydrates and
Mm.
proteins, whereas the green algae or even the brown algae, diatoms, they tend to accumulate lipids as their preferred storage, not carbohydrate, right? So I would say that the true algae, the
Mm.
eukaryotic algae, whether they're green or brown, both of those are really good at lipid production.
Right. I see. Just out of interest, because I know at the moment you're probably using castor hemp oil as your feedstocks. Essentially, what makes algae better? Why is it your preferred feedstock if that day comes? And if so, when do you envisage that scalability would even likely arrive?
Yeah, so we do use algae oil right now. We use it completely for our isocyanate production.
Ah,
the
okay.
the world
Right.
supply. Algae is grown for omega-3 fatty acids, and then you get a waste stream coming off those of unsaturated fatty acids. We can use any unsaturated fatty acid. We're agnostic to where it comes from. Algae, plants come from algae. Algae are a plant, however you want to say that. They produce very similar oils. We can use either one. We can use castor oil, like you say. We can use hemp oil. We can use algae. Algae are only our preferred feedstock because they don't compete with food. And
Don't.
because if you're going to do a dedicated crop, it makes the most sense to do algae.
Yeah.
Highest productivity, can grow on saline water. As you know,
Mm,
anybody who lives in the United States or any part of the world nowadays knows that the one of our enormous problems coming up is fresh water. We have tapped and depleted all of the underground water resources. They're starting to exhaust now. They already have in the Middle East. They have in
yeah.
they have in parts of the Midwest now. So algae can be grown in salt water. And so that is
Right.
a huge advantage for them, right? We have lots
Yeah.
of brackish. We're never going to run out of salt water. In fact, more of it is coming. I've said that a couple times. People are like, what do you mean? So, well, it's climate change warms and melts the poles. There's more water coming. It's
Yeah.
salt water. So it's our preferred stock for those two
Mm,
reasons, right? Absolutely. Chemistry, we can do it. You can grow it without competing with traditional food. So for those two reasons, but we also have to be practical,
mm,
right? We have to take the cheapest oil we can get.
yeah.
So if it's a waste stream coming off omega-3s, we get that relatively cheap. Same with hemp oil. The reason we like hemp oil is it's not better than
Mm,
algae oil. It's not better than castor. It's just that it's a waste stream. They grow
yeah.
hemp now for fabric, for fiber to use in fabric and other things. And there's not really
Mm.
much they can do with that oil. So we're like, we volunteer, we'll take it.
As you say, I think just from talking to, I'm not a scientist, but I just from talking to Felix Gijny last year from Blueburn, a very admirable project that he's doing there, which is great with the sort of farming and trying to encourage the agricultural side of algae,
Mhm.
but huge challenges, financially a big burden, and just the energy intensity, I suppose, of the drying of the algae and those kind of things it's a big ask, isn't it?
It's a big ask. I mean, the reason that modern agriculture works is because, as I said, as we learn to do things, you get an enormous advantage of having a seed. Nature already made that seed, really high protein content,
Yeah.
really high oil content, and desiccated it down for you. Seeds did it so they could store over, winter till the rains came the next spring, but that's an enormous advantage. Now, algae do the same thing, but in a different mechanism. Generally, when algae dry up, they will also insist, but we can't do that. You got to
Mm.
wait for all the water to leave. So part of the process is how do we harvest this stuff better? It grows. Algae will double its biomass every day for a slow growing algae, and for a fast growing algae, it'll double it every 3 to 4 hours.
Oh, wow.
And when you think about that, I mean, could you imagine going out to a cornfield and you have corn 3 feet high and you come the next day and they're 6 feet high? No, right? And the reason for that is because they're spending
Yeah.
energy on roots, they're spending energy on pumping water, they're spending energy on the cellulose to support
Yeah.
things. Out you're all photosynthesis all the time. So you get an enormous advantage on how fast it grows and the products that it makes, proteins and lipids, but you have the disadvantage that you have to deal with that water.
Yeah.
Now, several groups have attacked this by working on these new filtration systems, and some of these are turning out to be really efficient. So that gets rid of 99% of the water, makes the drying much less energy intensive. And some groups have gone with, we're not going to dry it at all. We're going to concentrate the algae. We're going to keep it liquid so we can pump it around. And then we're going to take the protein content one way
Yeah.
and the lipid content the other. And that so far is working pretty well. Nobody's taken that to really big scale, but there are several groups that are working on it.
Mm.
And they've got it to the, 40 acre, 50 acre kind of size things. To really make this a commodity,
Yeah.
you have to go to 10,000 acres. You have to go to,
Right.
at least an order of magnitude bigger and probably 20 or 50 times bigger. Perfectly doable. We can do the engineering of it, but there's a cost to that,
Yeah.
and people are hesitant to pay that cost until they know that there's the return at the
Mm.
end of.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I want to come back to that actually when we talk about biodegradables and bio-based a bit later on. But I wanted before I go into that with you, Stephen, I just wanted to congratulate you actually for the you've literally just won as a company, hot off the press,
Yeah.
as this podcast rolls out, the 2026 American Chemistry Society Green Chemistry Challenge Award in the small business category for Soleic, which is fantastic. Does that serve to almost validate your chemistry as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 different groups that we work with, that the kind of 2 different worlds we live in, right? One of them is consumers, retail products, right?
Mm.
That is primarily driven by marketing and advertising, not so much by science, right? But we still have to live in that world.
Mm.
So we still have to try to make products that are cool and compelling for people. People are people are visual. They want to see a bright color. They want to see a new shape. It's hard for them to really understand the underlying material that goes into something, but people are not idiots either, right? We all know what microplastics are. We've all read that some of
Mm.
the reports are a little alarming, but we all have microplastics in our brain. That worries me. And I think just innately people are like, well, I don't want that. Okay. I don't know for sure that that's causing Alzheimer or causing
Mm.
heart attacks or whatever, but what I do know is it shouldn't be there and therefore I don't want it. Okay.
Yeah.
So and that's what Soleic does. Soleic is a material that doesn't leave persistent microplastics because it's designed to biodegrade in the environment. Likely biodegrades inside of you. We don't
Yeah.
know that, but it should.
It's not no microplastics. It's just that they're not persistent microplastic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So as you walk around on our shoes and you abrade the soles off, those things are biodegrading on weeks time
Yeah.
frame in the environment. So they're not accumulating. So that's one part of it, right? And so great. We've got that, brands are starting to think about this. People are starting to think about that. People who buy our shoes are like, oh, this is
Mm.
amazing. Your shoes are super comfortable and they're not making microplastic. But it's a different thing to get something from the American Chemical Society. These are scientists who are looking at what you've made and then saying, well, okay, that's fine that you have your marketing wing over there that's convincing
Yeah.
people that you're sustainable and cool, but what's the real science behind it? And so it's super rewarding for us. I mean, look, I have a
Absolutely. Yeah.
PhD. I'm a scientist. I've published 200 peer-reviewed publications. It's super nice when a scientist looks at it and goes, you know what? This is important.
Mm,
And we think your innovation deserves an award for this year. We all know that the day is coming when we better deal with this thing, and you guys are
mm.
ahead of the curve to deal with it. So yeah, it's very satisfying, I would say.
Being a small business as well, in the small business category, does that say something about where polyurethane innovation is coming from?
Oh yeah.
Startups like yourselves. Yeah, I mean,
Oh yeah.
you're better placed to take those risks that larger companies take a long time to think about.
That's a two-edged sword, right? So number one, when I look at the resources that you name it, I'm not, whatever favorite chemical company, Dow, BASF, whatever, their budgets are billions
Mm,
of dollars in research. My budget last year was $3.6 million total. So when you think of it, sometimes it's overwhelming. You're like,
yeah,
oh, we have no chance. These guys could steamroll us in a minute. But then you go and talk to those people or go and visit those companies, and they're like, oh, what you guys are doing is so innovative. We could never do that, right? Could they do it? Of course they could. Why don't they do it, right? That the reason they don't do it is because their research has to be driven on their existing customers and solving the problem. That's what everybody deals with day to day,
right.
right?
Yeah.
My customers want something new, right? And I'm going to go deal with it. But their customer, here's an expression that I love. People love innovation, but they don't want to change. And what that means is everybody loves the iPhone. What are we up to now? 17, because it was better than the
Yeah.
iPhone 16 and the iPhone 14, but it was really just the same thing, right? I didn't have to learn anything new. But when iPhone 1 came out, oh my God, was there resistance to that? Right? People are like,
Yeah.
no, a computer, no, I have to learn new things. I have to do something different. So big companies are kind of stuck in that. They want to
Mm,
make iPhone 17, iPhone 18, iPhone. So if you're BASF, you want to make innovation, and it's not to,
mm,
say that these people are not creative or imaginative or anything else. What drives their companies is
mm,
incremental innovations on things people already know. They cannot go and do something completely different because number one, it's not supported
mm.
by the business unit. And number two, there's no proof that people really want it. Right.
True.
Our
Yeah.
biggest challenge is not that we can make cool stuff. We can make cool stuff. But even after we make cool stuff, people are like, but I don't know what that is. Like, I could tell you lots of stories about people, "Well, if your polymers are biodegradable, they'll biodegrade on my feet, or they'll turn my feet black, or if I make a raincoat out of this, it'll dissolve when I go out in the rain." And you're like, "No, no, no. You have cotton shirts. You go out in the rain with them, and they don't melt off your body, okay?" So there's part of this education
Yeah.
process, but there's also part of this, you know, unfortunately, innovators have to suffer all of they have to suffer
Mm,
all the real problems. Hey, my material has to work in a machine in Vietnam or in a machine in,
yeah.
Indonesia, right? So I have real problems that I have to deal with. Then I have a bunch of imaginary ones that people just make up. Your material must cost so much more. No, 35% more. Come on. We're ballpark already.
Mm,
You guys could save
yeah.
35%
Yeah.
on efficiency, right? So it's both of those things that keep big
Mm,
companies from directly competing with us. But then the other thing is, and I've been told this, I won't mention the company that said this, but one of the large chemical companies simply said, Steve, we love what you're doing. We're going to support it any way we can, but we're not going to give you any financial resources. But when you're successful, we're just going to buy you,
of course. Yeah.
but it's going to make all of your efforts worthwhile. Right. And so that is for a startup company,
Yeah.
that's a perfectly viable
Yeah.
outcome. Like
Absolutely.
if in 2 or 3 years, when everybody knows we're successful and
Mm,
people are starting to buy this, if one of the big chemical companies comes along and writes a big enough check,
yeah.
my investors and my employees will be like, "Yes, thank you." And that's not a failure. I hear people say all the time, "Oh, you're not gonna sell out to a chemical company." Look, I got news for you guys. If you want to deploy this
Mm,
all over the world and really impact microplastics, you're not doing it from a startup in San Diego.
no.
You're doing
Exactly.
this
Yeah.
when one of the big three invest
Mm,
billions or tens of billions or maybe hundreds of billions to make this go
yeah.
everywhere in the world. That is an enormous win for the planet, and I will happily do that.
Absolutely, yeah. I used to see it all the time in the packaging industry with PLA companies, startups just lining up at conferences and kind of putting themselves out there and for that very reason. And it makes sense because, it has to be a group effort or it has to be a big effort to get over these hurdles. I would say on the subject of iPhones, actually, and certainly my daughter ranks how good a phone is based on how many cameras it has on the back. So I think she ribbed me last year for not having enough cameras on the back of my phone, so that was I had to upgrade for that
That
reason. I'm not sure why you need so many cameras, but
that it's a tough pill to
you know,
swallow, Stephen, to know that you're behind the times, but
yeah. Brilliant. I want to come back to the chemistry again with Soleic and ask you about where Soleic sits, because is it essentially a family of plant-based polyurethane and TPU materials as opposed to one single material? I've seen it described as high bio content, low carbon footprint, and biodegradable. So second sort of double question really is, does increasing bio content then make biodegradation easier, or is it not related in that way?
good question. So there were 3 parts to that question. So
Yeah,
part number
I threw them all at you.
oh, yeah, so part number 1 is Soleic is a family of materials, both foams, TPUs, coatings, you name it, right?
Okay.
High bio content has nothing to do with biodegradation. All biology cares about is, do the bonds in your material, do they exist in nature? If those bonds exist in nature, then I have an organism that will eat those, that will break those bonds and eat what's inside of it. A really good example of this is there's a company called Braskem.
Yes.
They use sugar cane to make EVA. Now, ethyl vinyl acetate is not biodegradable, but I can't tell you how many people have told me, oh, but Braskem EVA is biodegradable. It's made from sugarcane. Mm-mm. Nope. They took sugarcane, they made ethanol out of it,
Mm,
they converted ethanol to ethylene. They use that ethylene to make EVA. Whether that ethylene comes from a petroleum plant or comes from sugarcane doesn't matter. The chemistry makes EVA not biodegradable. Conversely, you can get paraffin out of petroleum companies. Wax in a candle is perfectly biodegradable. Organisms know how to eat paraffin. Paraffin. You throw that out in your backyard, I guarantee you that wax it'll be slow because it's a big long thing. It'll
mm,
take time to chew it up. So petroleum can be biodegradable, bio can be non-biodegradable. What makes a difference, though, is that, and this is another fallacy that I see all the time. I see these companies that sell, we have an additive that makes something biodegradable.
mm,
Wrong,
mm.
fake, right? And I hate to say it, but I was just at this meeting last week, the phone meetings out in Detroit, and there was a company there selling this stuff, and I'm like, illegal in California, by the way, because what it is it's a cross-linker
Yeah.
the UV. So you put that in your mix, you put your product outside in the sun, it breaks it, it starts to fragment.
Mm,
Then it stops. It's not biodegrading. All you've done is
yeah.
turned a big piece of plastic into a lot of small pieces of plastic. You've actually accelerated the rate at which you make microplastics.
The OXO guys kind of promote it as a solution for places like the Middle East and India, where the waste management setup wasn't where it ideally should be, and they saw
Sure,
that it was almost like a short term fix.
sure. And for that, okay, listen, it's the same as with recycling, right? Recycling is great if you really recycle stuff.
Mm,
The one that I've had an argument with, actually, my wife, is, honey, there's a difference between recyclable and
mm,
recycled. The fact that something is recyclable doesn't mean it's recycled. So
yeah.
when I see these, 3, 4 different plastics all mixed into one thing that's sold as a consumer product, I'm like, that thing is not
Mm,
recycled ever. It cannot be. It'll cost you 3 times as much to disassemble that back into its individual polymers
yeah.
than it would just to go buy virgin stuff. So the fact that polyethylene or
Mm,
polypropylene or even PVC could be recycled, they never are when they're mixed together. But I wanted to bring up one other point, which is, so you can't add a little bit. Equally, it's absolutely possible to have something that is 90 bio content that doesn't biodegrade at all, even though the background structure is biodegradable. One of the things we fear and one of the things we've had to do is we have to actually go to the factories that are using our material to make sure they haven't done stuff to kill the biodegradation
Okay.
of our
Right.
material, right? If you do that, it's not like you can't do that. It's not like we say, "Oh, you can't do
Mm,
that." You simply cannot sell it as a biodegradable polymer. Still high bio content, still low carbon footprint, but no longer biodegradable. Now, there's some situations where you probably want that. There are probably times when you're like, "I don't ever want this polymer to biodegrade. I'm gonna" I don't know, just imagine, "I'm gonna
mhm,
use it in something where if it biodegraded, that it would no longer be functional, and this product has to last 50 years." Okay, fine, right? Low carbon, good. High bio content, good. Non-biodegradable, fine. But please don't take something and
mm.
think I'm gonna either put a magic solution in it to make it biodegradable or that I'm gonna put chemicals in it to stop biodegradation, then sell it as
Mm.
biodegradable. So those are 2 things that we
Yeah.
kind of think about and worry about and make sure that we educate people so they know the difference between this.
You've reminded me there of a study I saw, which I think you were involved with, which was looking at different companies that claim to have biodegradable, bio-based
Yes.
shoes.
Oh, yes.
And the
Yes.
one that you just reminded me of is the company that I think it was tested, claimed to have an apple seed in a
Yes.
compartment of the sole, maybe, or the shoe,
Yes.
and it wasn't actually
Yes.
there when they tested it. Um,
Yes.
are those kind of things, are they just blatant greenwashing, or are these companies that are perhaps using, like you kind of touched on it there, that if you're using a contract or a toll manufacturer, for example, you don't necessarily know that they're doing things exactly how you want them to be done?
Yeah, so part of it is greenwashing. Definitely that's it. That specific shoe, I'm not gonna mention the name, but I don't even think they right? So part of it is definitely just greenwashing, just blatantly, "Oh, it would be a good idea if we could do this, but, we don't have the time to really figure out how to biodegrade stuff, so we're just gonna buy plastic and say that it biodegrades." So there's one, there's blatant greenwashing. Then there's two, just an ignorance that a lot of people have. One of the ones that I think is the most common, and this was actually in several of the shoes, people say, "Oh, it's natural rubber, and since it comes from a plant, it biodegrades." But rubber, once it's
Mm,
vulcanized, doesn't biodegrade. Once it's cross-linked with sulfur, you've completely stopped the biodegradation of that. The tires that were made by Henry Ford for his Model A are still in a landfill in Dearborn, Michigan. That is 123 years ago. Those things have been sitting outside
mhm,
piled up. What they worry about is catching on fire. Occasionally, tire dumps will catch
yeah,
on fire. Those things are gonna be around in another 500 years. So the fact that you got rubber from a tree does not mean it's
mm,
biodegradable, and several of the shoe brands just assume that.
yeah,
There was another company that made synthetic leather from rubber, and what they used to say was they were I don't wanna say that they were greenwashing, but pretty close to it. What they would say was, "Our material returns to nature." So I think most humans would say,
mm,
"Oh, that means it biodegrades." It goes back, "No, that means it grinds into microplastics that
yeah,
become part of the ground or whatever." Okay, they're not toxic. Rubber
mm,
isn't toxic. Vulcanized rubber isn't toxic for you, but it absolutely makes microplastics that are not.
yeah.
They're not good for you and they're not good for the environment.
No, absolutely. So I know you publish figures, 56 to 100% can be bio content. What's the level on a Blue View shoe, for example, and what parts of the shoe are polyurethanes? Is it the upper
Yep.
coating and the sole, the heel?
So the Blue View shoe is got a knit upper that is cotton and hemp knit. It has got a jute insole, and then it has a polyurethane outsole and cupsole. So the
Okay.
cupsole and outsole are Soleic material. They happen to be 57% in the Blue View sneaker that's out
Okay.
there. The ones that are 100% are our TPUs. So
Okay.
TPUs, just by their nature, we can use isocyanates that are not from petroleum, that are
Right.
from the
Right.
foams. We still use petroleum-based isocyanates. Now, petroleum-based isocyanate in an alcohol makes a urethane bond. Urethane bonds are very common in nature. Those biodegrade. That's why our material, even though it's 50% bio content and the other 30% is from petroleum, still biodegrades, no problem at all.
Yeah.
The reason that shoe is 100% biodegradable is because the uppers and the jute, and those are also biodegradable. It was actually very tough to make a 100%
Mm,
biodegradable shoe. We had to find thread, we had to find cotton thread. The factories don't like that because it's weak, it's weaker than
mm.
nylon thread. We had to convince them to use that. We had to actually go and learn how to knit our own material because we couldn't put spandex is not biodegradable yet. We have a spandex coming out that will be biodegradable. Not this year. Don't anybody call me yet, but it's coming out soon. We've got one now. But anyway, spandex is not. And you so you use that to give
Yeah.
those upper shoes that elasticity. We had to do that through mechanical knitting. We
Mm.
actually had to go and we actually hired consultants to come and help us learn how to knit our cotton hemp thread so that it could physically
Okay.
slide apart instead of so mechanically
Right.
slide apart rather than have an elastomer in it. Now we have elastomers that are going to work pretty good. So challenging to get all of
Mm.
those parts biodegradable. The total bio content of our shoe is probably something around 80% because
Right.
obviously the jute and the hemp and the cotton, those were all 100% bio content, and they were actually about 50% of the
Mm.
mass of the shoe.
And is there, because I've got a pair of Blue View shoes and I like them. They slip on very easily. They're very comfortable. I wondered because I'd watched a video where you were talking about some of these things, how you had to stop the shoe collapsing with the way that's, a bit like you're saying there, the mechanical
Yep.
nature of how you had to construct this thing. Does that limit design flexibility in terms of how you can create different, more interesting designs for the shoes?
Yeah, it does. But if you're clever, almost all of these things you can find a way to get. So most of the designers, I would say of the shoe brands that we have talked to,
Mm.
the designers by far are the most sort of environmental parts of those companies, right? They're sort of they're creative
Yeah.
people. They're
Yeah.
the ones who are looking around and questioning, do we want to just make the same thing over again? Let's make something new. And something new for them could be both design, but it can also be materials and it can also be structure. It can be a lot of different things.
Yeah.
The 3D printer guys are kind of the same. We just had, I don't know if you saw it or not, but Danig Pelig, who's a 3D fashion
I had
printer.
a great
You saw
interview with her last year.
Yeah, she just had a fashion show
Mm.
last week and made some totally cool dresses 3D printed with our material. So 100% biodegradable there. It's absolutely fantastic. So I would say that yes, there are
Mm.
certainly challenges, but I think the designers more than anybody, the group that's always the most painful for us are the operations people because all they worry about is this is going to cause
The bottom
problems.
line.
This is going to be more expensive. They're the no. They're always the no. And the designers are always the let's try it. Let's try
Absolutely,
something.
yeah. And you touched upon that. I mean, 3D printing, I've written a lot about. It's great. And I know you've been working closely with an old friend of mine from the packaging industry, Fred Pinsock,
Yeah,
Genesis.
he's from
Um,
Genesis. He's a character.
those kind of partnerships, I suppose, are important in terms of for you, you want to get into these new areas, show what these materials can do, just the whole flexibility of where these materials could go into different
Yep.
niches.
Again, life is full of two-edged swords. So these are the guys who are out front, whether it's Fred or whether it's Standard or whether it's whoever. These are the people out in front. But by nature, they're also small consumers of
Mm,
our material. Part of us surviving is we have to get some of the big brands to go big with this.
yeah,
But they're risk averse, they're whatever. They imagine all this stuff. So we have to get the little brands to do this first to show people what's
mm,
possible but also to get put a little bit of FOMO, put a little bit of that fear of missing out into the big brands. So they're like, uh-oh, those little aggressive brands, consumers are starting to respond to that. And we see those dominoes starting to fall,
yeah,
right? Like we've got our material in enough products now that the bigger brands are now starting to notice this and they're starting to call and say, well, let's do a little program with
yeah.
you. Let's start, for us, for our survival, but also for the planet. Both of those are required.
When we talk about experimenting, I know you've got products, you've got examples out there with ski pole baskets, you've got flip flops, I think, which is another passionate area for you, I think, with your surfing. Um, anything else that's coming on the horizon?
Well, I think the coolest one for me is the stretch fiber. So we've just got that working now, still in the lab. But when you see that we can knit spandex, it's like, okay, now we have biodegradable spandex.
Wow.
My wife is a yoga mom. right? She's got her stretch yoga pants that she wears there every day. She'd love for those things to be more sustainable. Right now,
Yeah.
they're not. But I think that's what's gonna pop out in the next year. You're gonna see a lot of these brands. Our natural customers are people who are outside doing something,
Mm,
right? So they're the people who are into sports. They're the people who are into yoga. They're the people who are into hiking, whatever,
yeah.
things that where you get out and see the environment. You mentioned surfers. You cannot go to any beach in the world now and not see plastic pollution in the water or washed up on the beach.
Yeah.
It's kinda in some ways, it's like the real epiphany that I
Mm,
had was actually back in 2018. I don't know why, but I had always just had this affinity for the Maldives Islands, right? This little set of islands out in the middle of the Indian Ocean, sort of halfway between India and Africa. And I don't remember, but I'd seen videos of it before, and it is just the beautiful, tropical islands with really good surf and just those beautiful blue waves.
mm,
So I always wanted to go, bucket list thing. I finally got an opportunity to go to India in 2018 to talk at a UN sponsored meeting looking at transgenic,
mm.
plants for food. But it was only a 2-day meeting. And I'm like, am I going to fly all the way to Mumbai for 2 days? It take me 2 days to get there and 2 days to get back.
Yes.
So I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, wait a minute. I looked at a map and I'm like, yeah, it's kind of on the way there. I'm going to stop. So I did. I stopped and I took one of these boats. We were only, I think, 25 miles north of the equator. So I was on the very southern
Mm,
part of the Maldives. And the last day, the captain of the boat came to us and he said, hey, it's your last day. We got to go back to the airport at about 5 this afternoon. It's about a 3-hour drive back. What do you guys want to do the last day? And by then, we had done scuba diving, we had done
yeah.
fishing, we had done surfing. And so I said, kind of half joking, I said, hey, take us to an island nobody's ever been to before. Because there are thousands of little tiny
Oh,
islands
yeah. I
in
bet.
the archipelagos
Yeah.
down there. And he said, well, I don't know if they've never been here before, but I'll take you one that I guarantee you nobody has set foot on in 50 years. So we stopped by this little tiny island just out in the middle of nowhere that he knew about, and a beautiful little pristine place. Got the little dinghy, went into the beach, and we were kind of walking around the beach, and we got to the windward side of the island, and it was covered in water bottles and dead flip-flops and fishing nets.
Wow.
And we're just like, this is what we've done to the planet,
Mm, mm.
right? One of the most pristine places in the world 1,000 miles from any
Yeah.
population
Yeah.
source. And yet here was the beach covered in plastic. And of course, we picked up as much as we could and,
Mm,
and, and took it back, to get rid of it. But just sitting on the boat, so depressed at the
yeah.
thought of
Yeah.
have done to the planet. And then you think about all the animals that have to live in that, like
Yeah.
all the filter feeders, the dog, the
Yes. Yeah.
whales, the whale sharks. These
Yeah.
are the biggest fish on the planet, right? And that's what they feed. They're filter feeding. These guys are just eating microplastics now 24/7. And we really came back with the motivation then. And flip-flops, by the way, are the number one shoe in the world. 24 billion pairs of shoes are made every year, and about 6 billion of those are sandals or flip-flops. That's what's worn by fishermen, that's what's
Yeah.
worn by farmers, that's what's worn
Yeah.
by they don't all look like the 3-point ones that we wear. A lot of them are just a single strap sort of over the
Mm.
top. People would call them slides here, but
Yes.
that is by
Yes.
far the number one shoe in the world. We can now make those things for $5 a pair. We are getting very close to the
It's
point of where,
to
this is
parity. Yeah.
just at the tipping point where we can now make these for every single person on the planet who
Absolutely.
requires that kind of shoe for their daily life.
And I want to talk to you about BioISO because I think that's an important
Yep.
part of this conversation as well. I remember again, I keep harking back to my packaging days, but I remember the Coca-Cola plant bottle could work out the monoethylene glycol part with plants, couldn't work out the PTA part commercially. And I think with polyurethanes, obviously the polyols have been partially bio-based for many, many years. Isocyanates, a different kettle of fish completely. Not impossible, but rare, and of course hazardous, expensive, and so on. So what's your bio-ISO route, Stephen?
Yeah, so what we do is we use flow chemistry to make bio-iso using non-phosgene chemistry.
Okay.
So the way isocyanates are made today is you make a diamine, and then using phosgene chemistry, you turn that amine into an isocyanate.
Right.
And what we do is we start with a dicarboxylic acid, and then go through an explosive intermediate to get the isocyanate. So no phosgene required, no reactive chlorine, but you have a brief intermediate where you're going from the diacid to the diisocyanate where it's explosive. So what did we do? Mike Burkhardt, who's one of our founders, very clever chemist, he's like, hey, if we do this in flow chemistry, by the way, is very common, right? People a lot of times will say that. People are like, I don't understand what that means. It means you're not doing it in a bucket in batch chemistry. You're not taking a big vat, putting everything in, stir it. Instead, what you're doing is you're bringing two streams together, and the reaction goes on where those two streams meet.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
But that can be because it's flowing, the reaction can actually be a very small volume because you're putting lots and lots of fluid through in a very short period of time,
Okay.
right? So yes, we make an explosive intermediate, but it
Hmm.
never accumulates more than a mil. So even if it did explode, we wouldn't even know it,
Right.
right? But
Okay.
because it's in liquid, it
Yeah.
doesn't anyway. So we started down this path when we got it out of Mike's lab about 3 years ago. He had taken it up from the milligram scale to we were doing about a gram a day. And then we got it to about a kilogram per day last year. We're at 3 kilograms per day right now. And we just,
Okay.
but the important breakthrough that we made was we learned how to do this on existing industrial equipment. So we spent the last year, not so much, the chemistry was kind of worked
Mm.
out and the flow part of it was worked out, but you got to get all this stuff. You can't be making unique equipment every time. So what we
Yeah.
did was we spent the last year learning how to make this stuff work on existing industrial chemistry. And
Right.
now we will be at 10 kilograms per day sometime in the next 2 or 3 months. We've now ordered some of this equipment that comes in, and we can be at a ton per month in early 2027. Now, once you get
Okay.
to a ton per month, that's still not commercial.
Mm.
Ton per day is commercial, but we can get to a ton per month. And what that does is that demonstrates to all of the big
Yeah.
chemical company, hey, you guys, this is real. This is industrial. This can scale. Yes, it's still going to be
Yeah.
expensive. Yes, we're still going to have to optimize that stuff. But now we have an ability to show that we can do this. Now, you brought up that it takes enormous scale. Why does it take enormous scale? Steve, you're probably old enough to remember Bhopal. This was a
Yeah.
phosgene factory in Bhopal, India that blew up. I want to say in the late 70s, 75, 77. It was
Mm.
when I was a kid,
Yes.
right? And killed 12,000 people and blinded twice that many. Okay. We still use that chemistry to
Mm.
make isocyanates. We do it now in better containment. It's only about 10 places in the world that can even have these. Those plants cost billions of dollars
Yeah.
to make, like literally $3 or $4 billion to build a new plant. So one of the challenges, even if I wanted to make bio-based isocyanate using phosgene chemistry, no one's going to put up 2 or $3 billion to make something that there's no market for. We can make a kiloton plant for 10 million bucks now, and it can be distributed, right? Because it's not
Yeah.
chlorine based, because it's not phosgene based. Man, we do this in our lab right now.
So your vision is that it's going to be a modular system. Is it going to be something you license out to people?
Yep. Yep. We will use it immediately to make some very interesting TPUs, right? Thermoplastic polyurethanes are super cool because they can be 100% bio content, they can be 100% biodegradable, microplastic free, but TPUs can make some super cool stuff,
Yeah.
whether that's spandex, whether that's these foams. They're called supercritical foams.
Mm.
You look at some of these things and they are infinitely recyclable.
Yeah.
They're infinitely recyclable because they're a TPU, I can melt recycle them, same way I can with a PET water bottle. But because ours are bio-based and biodegradable, I can either chemically or enzymatically depolymerize them and then reuse the monomers.
Okay.
So if I imagine what is Algenesis going to be in another 10 years, we're going to be 100% bio content, 100% biodegradable, 100% recyclable, and state of the art for physical
Mm.
properties, state of the art for rebound, for elastic, for tensile strength. I mean, we have the possibility with biology to do so much more
Mm.
than you can do with chemistry. We just have more tools. We have more monomers. We have more different side groups. Biology,
Yeah.
the complexity makes it more expensive initially, but the complexity also makes it much more malleable to forming cool things that we cannot form with traditional chemistry.
And the properties, is the final isocyanate that you are producing, is it chemically identical to a petrochemical one? Hmm,
The
okay,
isocyanate groups are chemically identical. The thing
right.
between the isocyanate groups are quite often different. That that's the other funny thing. People are always people are always like, "Well, okay, you can make novel isocyanates, but they're not going to work because, MDI and TDI only work because they're MDI and TDI." Wrong. Those things exist because that was the easiest
Yeah.
isocyanate to make, and then we learned how to formulate those into cool products. There's no cause and effect between MDI
Mm,
and a cool product. No. The important part of that is it's an
yeah.
isocyanate and an alcohol that link together to make a polymer. The stuff that's between them does definitely impact the physical properties
Mm,
of the polymer. No question about that. TDI makes a very different polymer than MDI, makes a very different polymer than an aliphatic isocyanate.
right.
Having said that, you can make absolutely the same physical properties, the same clarity, the same tensile strength, the same rebound with our bio-based isocyanates than you can with the petroleum ones.
And the bio-ISO, is this protected with patents? Is there a particular
Oh,
thing you protect?
yeah, we protect a couple different parts of it. We certainly protect the flow chemistry part of it. We
Okay,
protect what our raw material precursors are. We protect that it's biodegradable and that it's chemically recyclable. All
right.
those things we have patent applications on. A couple of them are now issued, so we've got them. It's as you said, bio is not
Mm,
new. It's impossible for us to protect
yeah,
bio, right? You can't, right? By nature, that's not an innovation of
yeah,
man. But all of the different physical processes you do for it. So
yeah.
the flow chemistry machine, the fact that we could industrialize this and
Mm.
get industrial equipment to work on it, believe it or not, that's also patentable. So we filed patents on all that stuff.
We're talking about TPUs and elastomers and foams, but I mean, this could have application in slab stock, rigid foams as well, couldn't it?
Absolutely. We just have a contract now with the U.S. Coast Guard to make the rigid foam for their buoys.
Wow,
The
nice,
Coast Guard the
nice.
Coast Guard came to us several months ago, and they're like, "Our job is to protect the riverways and the waterways in the United States, and we think part of protecting those is not turning our dead foams into microplastics. Can you guys make bio-based ones?" And when you think about it, it costs them so much money to deploy a buoy and to maintain it that the actual cost of the buoy is trivial compared to all the downstream expenses. So they're like,
Yes, yeah,
we don't care if you're 35% more. It's meaningless for us. It
yeah.
cost us tens of thousands of dollars to deploy a buoy that cost us $1,000 to make. If it cost $1,003, we won't notice.
In terms of sustainability in the polyurethane industry, is biodegradability one of the tools that is missing at the moment in terms of volumes?
Yes, 100%. There's a reason that we do things incrementally, right? It's like when we first made polymers, it was like, hey, let's make polymers that last forever. And we
Mm,
weren't thinking about, well, maybe if the product's only going to last 2 or 3 years, maybe the polymer shouldn't last 2 or 3 thousand. It wasn't that they were evil scientists doing this. It was just that, hey, that our job was to make things that didn't biodegrade
yeah.
because we wanted them to last
Mm,
out in the environment. We did that. Then we had to rethink this about, hey, maybe that wasn't the best idea. Then people were like, hey, there's an energy component to polymers that we're throwing
mm,
away. Like we all know that plastics burn, and burn means you're releasing energy. Why are we throwing these things into landfills? Let's
yeah, yeah.
recycle them. So we learned how to melt recycle them. We learned how to take plastic water bottles and melt them down and
Mm,
spin them into thread that we can make garments out of. Great recycling. Again, tough to do because we start to mix things together. Water bottles are actually kind of the unique thing that recycles really well. Okay, so, but recycling is the big thing now. Low carbon. What's your LCA? Tell me
yeah.
you're low carbon because climate change is real. It was 110 degrees in Paris last week, the highest temperature recorded in 400 years.
Crikey.
Okay, we better be thinking about this stuff.
Mm,
Now, what's the next increment? The next increment is we're making microplastics that are everywhere. They're in our food, they're in our water, I'll give you one example of this. Slow release fertilizers. How do you make a slow release fertilizer? You take all your normal fertilizer, nitrogen, phosphate, potassium, you mix them together, you coat them with polyurethane. Then you throw those into the field. The polyurethane has little holes in it. Slowly water seeps into that. The nitrogen phosphate leaks out slowly. Why do you want to do that? You want to do that because if you dump a mass of nitrogen onto your corn crops. The first rain washes that down into the river. It goes into the river, out into the ocean. Algae blooms, and you have these dead zones from the algae blooming and then dying. Okay, slow release fertilizers are a great idea. A couple years ago, people said, what happens to those polyurethanes that we've been putting in the soil for the last 20 years? And they went and looked, and the soils are filled with microplastics. Now they're so bad, you cannot grow root crops. You can't grow beets, you can't grow carrots, you can't grow anything that you're going to eat in those soils anymore because the
Yeah.
crop is going to be full of microplastic. So now in Europe, they have now banned the polyurethanes that are used in slow release fertilizers. The fertilizer companies came to us about a year ago and said, hey, we read about your stuff. What do you guys think? Is it going to work? We tested it with them, worked perfectly good for the slow release. This year, this summer, we're now measuring how fast those polyurethanes are degrade. So it's the next incremental step. I think we finally have arrived there on plastics. Recycling is great. Do that when you can. What do we recycle? 5% in the United States, maybe 9% worldwide. It's a fraction of a percent. And we don't deal with the microplastics that are shedding all the time. Okay, now we're gonna. So it's still going to be a slow process before we can convert all of these products over to it. But I will guarantee you that this is the future of the polymer industry.
What type of algae, by the way, is in the Washington reflecting pool, Stephen? Do you know?
Well, I'll tell you what, you cannot believe how many emails I got. Former students or postdocs, you're needed in DC. Get out there now. It's a national crisis. I can tell you one thing, it's not a cyanobacteria. I can tell just from looking that it's a green algae. Cyanobacteria, they're called blue-green algae for a reason. They have this little tint and you can see it the way it reflects. So they definitely have a green algae. It's not a diatom. Diatoms would be brown, so they definitely have a green algae problem. It's, by the way, so easy to fix. It's just embarrassing. It's like, how many millions of swimming pools are there in the United States that are not green? Okay, this was not complex chemistry, you
I know.
guys.
Yeah. It's good fun, but it makes good tabloid stories, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, so
Brilliant. I'm just going to finish, if I may, with a couple of quick fire questions, Stephen. It's just a bit of fun I like to have at the end of each podcast.
Okay.
And I wanted to ask you, because bearing in mind you're from San Diego, where the legendary news anchorman Ron Burgundy hails from, what headline would you like Ron Burgundy to be reading out from his auto cue in a year's time when it comes to biodegradable polyurethane?
Yep. Microplastics are on their way out thanks to a San Diego company, Algenesis Labs.
Nice, nice. I'll look out for that one. And finally, you've said your vision is a world where plastics are made from plants and biodegrade rapidly when they land in the environment. So how close do you think we are to that world? Is it realistic?
Yeah, I would say the technology is ready to scale now. There is going to be some cost associated with that, both in terms of actual cost of the material, but also a cost just of switching existing systems over to it. Fortunately, we don't have to change the manufacturing infrastructure. That's one thing that in biopolymers you learn early on. Man, if you think a factory is going to buy new equipment to use your polymer, you're mistaken. They've worldwide trillions of dollars have been invested
Yeah.
in the manufacturing infrastructure. Cannot change that. Okay. Technology is ready to go. We need people to accept it. We probably need some government legislation or litigation.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing that people maybe haven't noticed, but I have. You cannot believe how many lawyers call me to be expert witness in their litigations against the polymer companies.
Oh, really?
Yep, it's the same thing that killed tobacco. Tobacco was not killed by legislation, it was killed by litigation.
Yeah.
And then the legislation followed. And my gut feeling is that's gonna happen here too. What's gonna happen is people with Alzheimer's,
Yeah.
who die young, they're gonna start looking at their brains and going, "They had 4% microplastics in their brains. There's a correlation here."
Yeah.
And they're gonna start suing these companies.
Yeah.
And once they start winning, then the legislation is going to follow quickly, and that's how we're really going to change it. We used to interact with an oil company, and the vice president, I won't mention who, but the vice president always had great one-liners. My favorite one-liner from him is, Steve, people only operate under two modes. They do nothing and then they overreact. Right? And that's what'll happen
Yes.
here. We've
Yeah.
done nothing about microplastics for 10 years now. We've known about it, and there's no excuse if over the last 4 or 5 years you haven't known how serious
Yeah.
this stuff is. So far, we're still hoping that somebody else fixes it or scientists were wrong. Oh, they were wrong. Microplastics are good for you. I've heard somebody say that, by the way. And it's too bad because if we just started now to do this transition and did it sensibly,
Yeah.
it'd be way less painful for us. Because what's going to happen is they're just going to ban this stuff. And then we're going to be like, well, now what do we do? Steve's not ready to scale to 1 billion kilograms. He can only scale to 100. How we get right? So
Mm,
look, let's do this sensibly.
yeah.
That's my last message to everybody who's out there who works in any industry that uses polymers. Start to think how you can transition away and do
Yeah.
it very quickly, because otherwise you are going to get stuck in the overreaction of people and they're
Yeah.
going to take it out on you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. It's been an absolute pleasure. As I said, I could talk to you for hours, and we'll have to have you back in series 2.
Okay, good. And then we'll do it later in the afternoon where we can have beers and really
Yes,
get philosophical.
that sounds like a good plan to me. Stay
All right.
classy, Stephen. Thank you very much indeed.
Exactly. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you. You have been listening to Polycast by UT, helping your business expand in all the right places. See you soon.